China, beyond the Great Wall. The age of China's empire began in 221 BCE, when the province of Qin conquered the other semi-independent Chinese states. The Qin king abolished the local states, established a strong central government, and named himself Emperor of all China. He united the Chinese people under a common currency and a common system of writing. To protect his empire from invaders, he ordered the construction of a wall that stretched more than 4,600 miles from the North Korean border to the province of Gansu in north-central China, a wall that is today known as the Great Wall of China. As Chinese dynasties came and went, life behind the Great Wall prospered. The Qin dynasty was later replaced by the Han dynasty, during which the construction of the Silk Road allowed trade to flourish between China and other great civilizations of the ancient world. Demand for Chinese silk brought wealth to the government and people of China, and consequently, art, literature, music, and science thrived. The Eastern medical practice of acupuncture was invented. Scroll painting and religious sculpture grew in popularity. Dictionaries and histories were written, and classical works of literature collected. Huge orchestras with as many as 700 instruments performed at the imperial court, and craftsmen produced elaborate works in iron, bronze, copper, gold, silver, and other valuable metals. In cities, residents and visitors enjoyed tea shops, cake shops, gem dealers, street acrobats, storytellers, and colorful markets. Education rose to great importance under Han rule. Because the Han emperors followed the teachings of the great philosopher Confucius, who believed that education was the key to good governance, a system of public schools was developed for the education of Chinese boys. Classes taught by Confucian teachers emphasized respect for authority, family, and tradition. Teachers became one of the 5 objects of worship, the other 4 being heaven, earth, the emperor, and one's parents. The Confucian system of ethical values was fundamental to Chinese thought and behavior. By the time the Tang dynasty assumed power in 618, Buddhism had spread across China. Buddhism taught that suffering could be eliminated by following the Eightfold Path, which outlined guidelines for the achievement of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Taoism also developed around the same time and was a way of looking at life and thinking about the world, which the Chinese believed would lead to a life of happiness. The philosophies of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism became known as the 3 doctrines, or 3 teachings. Practices in the 3 doctrines, such as Buddhist prayer and Taoist breathing exercises, were an important part of daily life in ancient China. Despite shared ethical and moral beliefs, both the rich and poor citizens of ancient China assumed very different lifestyles. Most of the poor in ancient China were farmers and worked the land assigned to them by nobles to provide food for themselves as well as the nobility. They dressed in simple clothes, stuffed with paper in the winter to keep warm, and wore sandals made of straw. They survived mainly on a diet of fish and rice and lived in crude mud houses, which they shared with several other families. In cities, the poor lived in small overcrowded apartments and suffered from poor sanitation and growing teenage violence. By contrast, the rich imitated the imperial way of life, which consisted of elaborate costumes and lavish decorations. The nobility lived in large, comfortable homes with many rooms, fireplaces, draperies, cashmere carpets, wall paintings, and courtyards, and wore silk robes and leather slippers. Noble children were privately tutored in science, math, literature, art, religion, and music. As the wealth of the government and nobility grew, the empire of ancient China expanded beyond the Great Wall. Chinese explorers made voyages to new lands in search of new territories and trade routes. By the 1400s, the Chinese had built a mighty armada of ships, carrying more than 27,000 soldiers and sailors. They loaded the ships with Chinese silk and porcelain and set out for the unknown 7 times. These great nautical expeditions resulted in the establishment of trading posts across the Indian Ocean and as far away as the Persian Gulf. Later emperors, however, halted investment in overseas trade. The ships that had visited the world returned, and Chinese life resumed behind the Great Wall.